Welcome, everyone, to episode 320 of Dial the Gate, the Stargate Oral History Project. My name is David Reed. I appreciate you being here with me. Alan McCullough is live. Hello, sir. Writer and
Whoa.
producer, Stargate, SG-1, Atlantis, Universe. It's a pleasure to have you back.
Thank you so much. Yeah, pleasure to be back.
And if you were in the live chat, just go ahead and submit your questions to the moderating team. And whoops, what button is that? That is the wrong button assignment. Okay, that's weird. I can't explain. That's a new one. The moderating team will get those questions over to me. What's been going on, man? What's been keeping you busy?
I mean, it's I don't know. It's been a little bit slow lately. I've been working on some new projects. The industry took a big downturn after the WGA
It
strike, and then
did.
retrenchment. Yeah, nobody. Who knew? Who knew? Yeah, no, it's been pretty slow, but I've got a couple of projects that I'm pitching now here in Canada. I live in Toronto, Canada, and then so that's everything is. I just sold a pilot to a company in Calgary. We'll see where that goes. There's another couple of projects that are being circulated as we speak, so we'll see. We'll
Can we
see.
be doom and gloom for a couple of minutes?
Can we do doom and gloom or
Can we
be?
discuss doom and gloom for a couple of
Yes,
minutes?
sure, absolutely.
I hear that you guys are getting hit harder than our film and TV industry is down here, and just in terms of, and this is one of the things that I feared after the strikes from a couple of years ago is that I'm not going to say I called it, but it feels a lot like it because I knew that there was going to be a retraction coming in terms of the volume of content. And I anticipated something around 50%, and a lot of that seems to have been realized. What is your take? What's going on?
I mean, I don't know if it's worse up here. Canada's industry as a whole is probably 10% of the size of the US, if
Yeah,
if that. So, there's the fact that we produce fewer shows
yeah,
is just a sort of a that's built into the DNA. But we also have fewer writers trying to staff those shows. I think a lot of people. What I've noticed is that the budgets of every show have skyrocketed, but the license fees that the broadcasters pay, up here at least, haven't changed at all. So
wow,
really, it's a question of if you, in the old days, if you sold a show to a Canadian broadcaster, you could get started, you could start filming, and then you could work on selling international territories in the U.S., et cetera, to make up the rest of your financing, or as you went along.
hmm,
But that's not really possible anymore. You can't. The license fee from a Canadian broadcaster is just too small, and so you can, you sold a pitch to a Canadian broadcaster, but you can't really do anything with that until you have a U.S. broadcaster on board, or foreign distributor, or foreign territories, or something like that. It's becoming, and it's really a producer problem more than it is a writer problem.
okay,
I really feel for the Canadian producers who are caught in this trap, but it bleeds into, my work as well, my profession as well, because there are fewer projects being greenlit to development, there are fewer projects being greenlit to the screen. And up here we don't. There's also only so many broadcast slots available. We have basically three or four main networks. And when you talk about the total number of primetime slots
hmm,
in a week, subtract out all the shows that are going to be bought from the U.S. and broadcast here, which obviously Canadians love, and there's no problem with that. But when you look at just the few number of spots that are remaining for original Canadian series, it's grim,
hmm.
and then sorry, this is a way longer answer than you probably wanted,
No,
but
it's the answer I wanted. I mean, it's not the answer that I wanted. It's a response that I wanted. Yeah.
okay, yeah. And then the further complicating factors, of course, Netflix and Amazon,
Right.
and I think some of the other streamers have moved into Canada and set up Canadian operations, but there's been some bureaucracy around what they have to contribute to the Canadian industry, and how much, and how many shows, and that's been hotly debated for several years, and through successive governments. And
Right.
we just had an election. They're gonna,
Yeah.
it's anyway. It's everybody is hoping that, I think it's called Bill C-11 now. I think that's the latest name. Everybody's hoping that Bill C-11 will finally codify what the the streamers are going to be required to contribute, which will allow the streamers to plan and decide how much,
Okay.
whether or not they want to stay in Canada, whether they or how they want to do it. So
And then
everyone's
allocate
hoping for the peace.
accordingly.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
So
Wow, man. I can't remember the last time I watched a network television series. I can't even remember the last time I turned network on,
I know it's
except
grim.
when
That's the
oh dang
grim.
it, I picked the wrong input. Let me switch back. Oh, there's network television. Okay, other than that, I can't think of it,
Yeah.
But I guess it's terrestrial TV. Um, sometimes I'm surprised that it still exists, and I have to wonder just how much longer before they're like, you know what, it's not worth broadcasting this anymore.
I
You've got a
I
few
know. I
people
mean,
in.
it feels like it's been on a downswing for almost a decade now, and
Mhm.
streamers, made it worse. And I'm nothing against streamers. I don't, like they just did what they were going to do. It's not
Yeah,
like,
streamers
but
gonna
yeah,
stream.
yeah, streamers going to stream exactly. But yeah, it is, and up here, I mean, yeah, the state, our broadcasters, our big broadcasters, just don't have the big the big hefty studio funding behind them. So they're really the main the main source of funding for the broadcasters is the Canadian government, and
Hmm.
that's been clawed back little by little. The
Hmm.
pandemic didn't help. Anyway, yeah.
Fun times, my
I'm not an
friend.
expert. I'm not an expert about it, but yeah, I've definitely noticed the slowdown.
Let's talk about this little franchise that we're both familiar with called Stargate.
That's
Um,
on happier news, yes.
now for something completely different.
Uh,
When you look back on your time with the franchise and you're putting pen to paper or fingers to keys, as it were, which characters flew off your pen or came out of your mind right onto the page or to the screen easier than any of the others, and which were just the hardest for you to grasp? And I'll let you tango with that from either end.
Well, sure. I mean, it's I think among the episodes you've chosen to talk about today is certainly one of the characters who I dearly loved and always. I mean, I loved watching him and I loved writing for him, and I found it easier to write for him, and that's Baal, of course, Cliff Simon playing Baal. And I think a lot of the episodes that you sent me, you curated for me today, are heavily involved, or at least the SG1 episodes heavily involve Baal. Um, as far as the team goes, I remember Rob Cooper asked me this question. We were doing a DVD commentary
Mm.
about possibly my first episode ever. I think it was Prototype. We were doing a DVD commentary together, and he asked me which character I found the most difficult to write for, and I said it was Mitchell because he was brand new. There wasn't a body of work to observe or to listen and try to get his voice,
To
and
emulate.
yeah, exactly. And I stand by that, although Rob was said, "Oh, well, yeah, no, for us it was Teal'c." Like we didn't think that
Yeah.
you captured the voice of Teal'c in the early days, at least, as well. Um, I think, yeah. In the beginning, I still stand by. I had a lot of trouble kind of hearing Mitchell's voice. A lot of the jokes that I gave him were really corny, and it just, it didn't really sit well on him. And whereas, some of the other characters, I didn't have that problem with, or at least I didn't think I did.
Can I level with you?
Yeah.
I really don't think that Mitchell got to really find his voice. That's my opinion.
Hmm.
Um, there's a great scene that Ben plays in Avalon 1 where Teal'c shoots at the wall with the P90. And Mitchell goes, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, man! Bullets bounce!"
Right. Right.
He keeps on doing that. And I'm like, I see where this is going. This is great. And we never really got anything like that again.
Right. Right.
And he was played as lower key than Jack. Shepard really is so. I mean, did I do that? Did I make that thing appear on the ceiling. He was cut much more of the same cloth as Jack in terms of being like a bad boy. Mitchell was not a bad boy. He wasn't. He didn't buck against authority. He was much
Right.
more stand at attention and I'm ready to go. Yes, sir. How you want me to jump? How high? And so he was awkward, in my opinion, in a lot of the more casual situations. And I
Hmm.
think that this is exemplified in an episode in I believe season 10 where they're all on a camping trip and Mitchell can't settle down. He's working the entire time. So they've at least taken that and said, okay, we're going to crystallize this and make this his thing. Oh, he hears a sound. Oh,
Right.
he jumps out of the he hears the gunshot. Oh, he jumps out of his chair, things like that. Or am I completely off my rocker?
No, it's
Pardon the
funny.
pun.
No, I don't think you are. And I think it's funny because when I went back and you gave me some of the episodes we were going to talk about today, and I honestly I didn't remember anything
It's
substantive
okay.
about it.
It's only
So I had to
been like
go
20 years.
almost. Yeah, I think I wrote them in
Nearly.
2005, 6. So
Yeah.
yeah, 20 years. Yeah. The among them in I think it was Stronghold or we find out about a little bit about Mitchell's backstory and how
Mm.
he was an ace pilot and a guy who plunged forward and didn't wait to be told and the whole kind of final act of that episode is about we staged a giant battle where Mitchell would run headlong straight into gunfire and end up saving the day by kind of disobeying orders. And I'm not sure that was. I'm not sure that was ever like that felt a little forced in that in
Okay.
that episode, and maybe I'm not sure how much of that we continue to see. Like it's like you say, he seemed a little more by the book, uh, you know, in the later seasons, and less kind of throw caution to the wind. I
Hmm.
mean, obviously the SG1 team is going to take risks. They're always going to do that
As an ensemble.
as an
Yeah.
ensemble. Yeah, I didn't, and it actually happens again in the other in Off the Grid. I think when
Yeah.
he comes up with that sort of harebrained plan to propose as a drug dealer, it doesn't that didn't never quite struck me as truthful for his character, such as it is.
I never thought about it that way in terms of Stronghold, like because you're trying to tie his personal arc of what's happening with the Reed Diamond character back at the hospital into that situation because it's on his mind, to the
Yeah.
point where Carter has taken point in this mission, which he
Yep.
just follows her lead, and I love that they did that. That the characters trusted each other enough that it's like, you got this one, okay, I got this one. Now you're going to do what I tell you. Okay.
Right.
And I liked that aspect of it, but I never really thought about, behind the scenes in terms of when you guys are developing a story like that. We've got this B story over here, and we want to tie it a little bit more solidly into the A story. So this may be a little bit unusual in this situation, but we are going to make the character do this.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Wow. I never
That
thought of
that
it that
happens.
way.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely, yeah, we're definitely trying to weave a storyline together. If there is a clear B story, which there isn't always, but
Right.
oftentimes there was in this case, a very distinct B story, distinct cutaways, distinct personal story for Mitchell with Reed Diamond, and yeah, and you definitely want to tie them thematically, if not plot wise. Like
Hmm.
that's sometimes that I don't think we really did on this one so much, but yeah, thematically, whatever Reed Diamond was saying to Mitchell influenced him to take that risk or and save the day or undergo some kind of like crazy act of heroism
Hmm.
in the A story in the mission.
And this
And
is,
I know we spent time. I know Rob Cooper had in his mind when we got into the concept meeting for this episode or the stunts meeting or the special effects meeting. Rob was like, no, I want this to be a big battle. I want big. I want air ramps, people flying. I want tons of gunfire. Like it was the
like you're
close.
attacking a stronghold.
Yeah, like legitimately, he wanted something big and maybe bigger than we'd seen on a Stargate episode in recent years, at
Wow.
least. Yeah, he really wanted to make it into something big, and I think it was to. help solidify what they were trying to get at Mitchell, or at least in that moment.
Yeah, they're rescuing Teal'c, if I'm remembering correctly.
That's right.
Like, what would you not do to save your friend under these certain conditions? And also with Mitchell, there was a lot of he played a lot with guilt in the back half of this season. If I'm not mistaken, was it Collateral Damage? That was the other one. With the
Yes.
Galaran memory technology, it was introduced. Was it your idea to carry that into this episode, or was that, you know what, we have this story need here. We don't share the secrecy of the program very often. Let's go ahead and use this piece of technology that we introduced. At
I'm not.
which came
Yeah.
first?
I'm not sure whose
Okay.
idea it was, but it definitely didn't come from me, at least originally. I mean, you have to remember that I think Stronghold and Off the Grid Stronghold would have been the second episode I
Okay.
I had pitched. So I pitched a prototype. That one got sold, and even that, I think I spoke about it last time. It had nothing to do. I think my original pitch for Stronghold was like Teal'c gets kidnapped by some Jaffa council members who are trying to disrupt the council,
Mm-hmm.
and we have to rescue them. I mean, there may have been a little more to it than that, but that's essentially all it was. There wasn't. I don't even know if Baal had a part in my
Mm-hmm.
original pitch. I might have invented a low grade Goa'uld to serve the purpose. And in fact, no, I'm sorry. In Off the Grid, I think I just created a low grade Goa'uld who was trying to create a little mini empire,
Yeah, fiefdom.
and mini fiefdom. And then when it became Baal, and uh, that obviously made the episode that much better rather than introducing somebody brand new.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly the Galaran technology you're talking about, yeah, none of that would have been part of my original pitch. That would have all come through discussions in the room, and breaking the story as a group. So I can't say whose idea it was, but I also can't take credit for it.
Yeah, just gonna be honest. No, I appreciate that. The show is in its ninth season. You're saying that there were instances where you created new characters to fill in certain roles. Where was the push-pull continuum in the room in terms of, well, we have all this mythology, let's bring back someone that we know, versus, you know what, let's create something new? How often did one supersede the other? Was there an inclination to build the universe out further that first year that you're remembering, or was there an inclination more to, look, we've got some really good satellite actors here, let's bring them in?
I think, yeah, I think the inclination would probably have been the latter, to try to reuse who we already had. I think there were a lot of new elements being introduced in season nine, the
Mm,
Ori, the new, Mitchell. And so I think when it came to other things like, I suspect, I can't swear to this, but I noticed it a lot when I went back and watched those episodes. There was an attempt, not just to reuse people that we had already used, but even they've to tie those three episodes together. I'm talking about Stronghold, Off the Grid, and Insiders. I mean, from season 10.
mm-hmm.
It was sort of revealed in season 10, and maybe we didn't even know this at the time. We were doing the season 9 episodes, but it was revealed in season 10 that this was sort of three stages of Baal's plan, or the first two stages failed, and this was part three or something. I can't remember the.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think he was trying to set up the fiefdom before using the Merlin weapon to wipe out the galaxy, and that's what the clones ostensibly had found out, which was also a lie, but which is the beauty of
Typical
working.
Baal.
Typical Baal, exactly. But yeah, I believe that you always have a need to introduce certain new characters, but I think when it came to creating new enemies, or that there may have been a desire to use who we had in house already, because it was just tracking the Ori storyline. You're always going to introduce new priors and things like that. So it gets to be a sea of faces after a while.
Off the Grid. Maury
Yes.
Chaykin. He's returned for his second episode. I love this. General, you came. They told me you were coming. I didn't believe them. I said, I don't believe you. I'm like, He doesn't flange. He just does his thing. And the other thing that Brad mentioned that Maury once told him was, Brad, how do I flange? Any memories of Nerus?
I sadly did not get to meet Maury Chaykin in person. Or I mean, I watched the closest I got was watching the dailies in advance of the show being cut together. But Maury Chaykin is one of a kind. Absolutely great. The only thing I remember about that particular episode is that there was some concern about that he going to become too much of a goof, like is he gonna I mean there's always a concern with an actor like Maury Chaykin. How you have to be able, you have to pull levers, go bigger, go smaller, et cetera, et cetera. And I think the performance we got out of Maury was great. I do remember there was a lot of unhappiness about the state of the prison bars. Like when there was some time we cut away, and then the meal had arrived.
Stuff on them, yeah.
Smeared all over the bars, and I remember.
What is that? What's he been throwing?
Just furious. Like what? Why on earth would like? Why would how? I wonder what circumstances would that have happened with the two of them sitting there talking, where he's just going to get up and smear mashed potatoes or. On the bars. So, but those are such minor things,
right?
To be concerned about in an episode. But I do remember that was like there was a bit of a kerfuffle about like what are we going to do? Can we digitally take them out? No, it's too many shots. It'd be too expensive. Can we, et cetera, et cetera.
No, for sure. What money do we have here?
Yeah,
this was also one that I remember getting to the end of and being like, ugh, no resolution again. It cuts to Baal, getting ready to staff Nerus, and it cuts away. So it's like, did he? Yes. Didn't he? And I appreciated finality, even though you could clone them and bring them back if Baal really needed to. I'm sure he's got his DNA on ice or something need him for a science something or other. Let's get your brain back in here. How did you feel about that? And how do you feel about that as a writer in terms of, all right, let's just cut it here and leave it ambiguous? A thread for the future if we want to use it or not.
I totally get it. I understand. I mean, like again, you've got a character like Nerus. You bring him back. He's reliably funny. He's reliably entertaining. I get why you might want to keep him around, and so I understand the sentiment. I think that we got drunk on our own Kool-Aid a little bit with the Baals. I mean, we opened up a can of worms with the cloning, and I think part of what Insiders, I know I'm skipping ahead here, but I think part of what Insiders was designed to do was like, let's tone this down because there's Baals running everywhere. We're never going to run out. Every time, he can feature in infinite number of stories because it's a new one, and I think there was an attempt made. In Insiders at least to identify how many of them there were and maybe reduce the number. So there's still more than one when they depart, but at least we've sort of captured them a little bit. But yeah, I like finality as well. I think I believe that I can't remember what happened. Is it Dominion where the final Baal is actually killed, or
that's Continuum?
Oh, Continuum.
Yeah,
in the movie.
Yeah, the Tokarev captured the last clone, and the original who possessed the tracking device that could be removed pays a visit to Earth. But yeah, no, Insiders. Let's move along to Insiders.
Just before we leave Off the Grid, I will say the other hotly contested thing about Off the Grid was the opening scene, and then the sort of the loop back. That by the time we loop back, they just magically get away. That was also a big. It was written that we would never see it, but it wasn't written that there would be seven gunmen all with their guns trained on Mitchell, and he would just kind of chuckle, and then we would hard cut to them running in the woods. It was like, well, wait a second. That to me felt like a bit of a cheat, and I know others felt the same way. Uh, the fact that Mitchell got away um, so magically was always, kind of spoiled that episode for me a little bit.
The Once we get the Asgard beaming technology,
Oh, yes.
there
Don't even.
is a play of, not that there wasn't before, because there certainly was, but just in the nick of time comes
I
into
know.
stark focus.
Yeah.
These are adventure stories. At the end of the day, this one is more popcorn fare than it is Game of Thrones.
Yes.
Um, as my dad says, you've got to buy it. You know, do they keep on getting saved like this? Would they in real life? No. Does Vala switch on transport rings and magically find herself on the surface of an Ori planet in the Ori galaxy? Probably not. That to me is probably the biggest conceit of the franchise. And
Right.
there are a couple of doozies in there, but it's like that to me was a real stretch.
Right.
Like the gymnastics that you would have to do to physically get her there. Um, Let alone an Ori ship at the other side of the Supergate for something. But I
Right.
get it, and I appreciate it because it's a great character, and you want to keep on using it. When you guys paint yourselves into the corner, sometimes you have to leap over the paint, and sometimes you're going to get paint on you.
Yeah.
And there's just only so many ways that you can do this after, how many episodes, and in this case, your team doing 40 episodes a year. It was
Yeah.
unheard of. It's unheard of
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
you
No,
know?
it is. It was crazy. It was crazy.
Man.
I know that I do know yeah, that's another, it was another, I think that episode put in stark focus the problematic use of the
Mm-hmm.
Asgard beaming technology because it started with I think it started earlier in the season with they wore the wrist bracelets or
Yeah, then
something,
they
and then
got a
the
chip
bracelets
embedded
were
in them,
taken
and they
off.
take the chips out, and yeah,
Then the chips, and it was just like it was kind of like we've got to figure out a way, and then it was like cloudy or out of range or this and this. But
there's
yeah,
too much
like I mean,
interference. The sci-fi
yeah,
cheat.
yeah, too much interference. That's like the old Star Trek
That's
radio stuff
right.
where transporter doesn't work. But yeah, it became a problem, and this episode brought it into stark focus. The whole thing where they're literally about to get shot, to get beamed up, and they go through and all the squibs pop the wood where they were just sitting moments. Like it was it was perhaps just a little too. I think we laid it on a little too thick in this episode.
And
But
if, as a parting gift to really kick it in its teeth while it's down, if we haven't beaten up on it enough, do you remember the DHD being transported away in this episode? Did you notice anything, Alan, when
I
you rewatched
remember the
this?
DHD being transported, but I didn't. I don't know what you're speaking of. I don't remember.
Underneath the DHD is some very healthy bent grass.
Underneath the sand, was it a sand plant? I don't remember the.
They just sat it on the grass, and then they removed the element, and no one CG'd in
Oh,
technology
like
or
dead. Oh, I
base.
see what you mean. Like as though it had been there for as long as it had been there for thousands of
Right,
years.
and the grass was, they had literally sat the prop on it and then removed the prop, and underneath it was the grass that was there. And I remember
That's
that the
funny.
first time I watched it, and it was like, okay.
It's funny because I don't know if we had ever. This is the kind of thing you run into. I don't know if in this at the script stage we had ever contemplated that the DHD was also being taken.
I see.
And I mean, in my mind, they're stealing the Stargates. That was the pitch, right? They're stealing the Stargates,
Mm-hmm.
and no one actually considered that the Stargates are kind of useless without the DHD.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, that someone along the way figured that out, and that was solved. But yeah, but not solved to the point of not just pulling the prop, like vanishing the prop on the
Exactly.
day.
I
Yeah.
think in the lore of the show, and someone can certainly fact check me in the comments, but my understanding was, like, we've seen in Nemesis, for instance, in season 3, you can dial out, but you're going to have a really hard time dialing in if you've changed the location of the Stargate and the DHD hasn't been there to update its coordinates in the system,
Right,
in
right,
the
right,
network. So
right.
yeah, he would have to be taking them if he was planning on using them to not just to go
To escape
through,
the
but to
ship,
come
which is what
through.
they
Yeah,
do. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that's true too. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, and that might have been what led to it is that again, I don't remember, but that might have been what led to the decision to take the DHD as well. Is that when we're in the hold of the ship and the way the means of escape was using the Stargate and firing it up. Like, how are we going to do that?
Unless you're going to stand there and rotary dial the thing and pray that it had enough juice when it was connected
Yeah,
earlier to work.
exactly,
You need it,
exactly.
man.
Uh, I remember pitching just an absolutely, this is again the mark of inexperience, but I pitched an absolutely wild uh, vis effect that they were all stuck in the hold. The Jafar are closing in. They seal the doors while Daniel's trying to work, but Baal tries to one up them by venting the cargo hold, but they get it just dialed in time, and the Stargate basically passes through them
Oh,
as they're
because it's getting pulled out into
as it's
space.
all getting pulled out of the hold.
Wow.
And yeah, that one will just have to live on in the imaginations because I think they took a look at that, and were like, this is an insane. I mean, you're talking about suspending them and having
Right.
just like it would have been
Tricky.
a massive visual effect.
Do you want
Anyway,
you want a fun anecdote regarding Stargate hijinks?
sure.
So when the comics were being published around, I guess season 7 or season 8, there was an officially licensed comic adaptation, and you can go on Gateworld and read all about it. But they were coming to Darren to run by some ideas, who runs Gateworld, to make sure that they were canonically accurate in terms of how they were constructed, and they wanted to show a sequence of Jack being tortured by a Gold or someone
Okay.
with a Stargate.
With the
And
start,
do you know the game Portal?
no.
Okay. The logo is going through from one to the other and one to the other and one to the other and one to the other. Someone wanted to have two Stargates dial each other and then have them rotating so that Jack would fall through, it would switch over to the top, Jack would fall through, it would switch over to the top, Jack would fall through. And Darren was like, unfortunately, you need pretty far apart points in space to figure that out. So,
Yeah.
but it's a great idea. Stay right.
Yeah.
But little things like that, I appreciate the mental exercise of trying to figure out how that would work and being like, no, that pushes our idea too far. But fun things like that. Do you have any memories of Cliff Simon or watching the dailies and seeing this guy work?
He just I did meet him once. He came to the writing room once, and he just was a really sweet guy and loved. I mean, the best thing about working with Cliff and and the character is he showed up with a smile on his face. He was having so much fun. I think that's why we all liked writing for the character so much. He came in. He always had he. There's again an acting trick of like you show up on set with a secret, right? And it makes you more even if it has nothing to do with the scene you're doing. You as an actor, you come up with a secret for your character and you hold that, and then it makes your performance more interesting. And it felt like Ball and Cliff always had a secret. Like we gave him a secret, of course, in the script, but it just felt like there was always something going back. He was always one step ahead. Even when we were in the script, we were ahead. He still played it like he was one step ahead, and it was so much fun to watch. Yeah, no, he just R.I.P. He was such a great guy, and I think I mean, I'm sure he could have been a part of the Stargate canon for decades to come.
I remember
If there was a new show, I mean, I'm sure he'd be one of the first people we'd be calling back.
I would have hoped. I remember having a conversation with him about Continuum after it had come out, and he was still pushing. There's still storylines to tell. Well, who is the guy underneath? Once Baal is free of this, and he and Vala could have some intimate times. He was still pitching.
Yeah,
He loved the character.
yeah.
Do you remember anything about the cost of Insiders or the technology having improved over the last few years to be able to pull off more shots? Budgeting this episode to pull this thing off. I mean, how many balls were you? I think there are 25 or 30 at the end of the day, if I'm not mistaken, once they capture them all
I'm not
throughout the
yeah,
galaxy.
I don't know, and I'm not sure how many we see together, right? It's because you have to remember it's passes with the camera, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
like, and that's the amount of work that Cliff would have had to do in that episode.
Mm-hmm.
You have to shoot him over here with an interesting look on his face, and then he's over here checking some shelves, and then he's over here, and you have to shoot every single one of those one at a time.
Mm-hmm.
So Cliff would have been on set for hours just shooting the background balls, and I mean, we obviously would have used stunt doubles or uh,
Stand-ins and
stand-ins,
lookalikes.
yeah,
Yeah.
lookalikes whenever we could. But a lot of the time in those, there's at least a dozen shots, maybe more, maybe 20 shots in that show where we see multiple Cliff Simons on the screen at the same time, and all that would have been done. I mean, practically assembled in VisFX, but they needed source footage.
The
I think
data.
even to this day, that's how they would do it. I can't imagine. I don't think the technology of moving people around has maybe it has. I don't know. Maybe VisFX technology has advanced to the point where if you can just change a person's position and put them and animate them in a new position. But back then that was how that would have been done. Every single frame of that would
Every
have
one of
been,
them.
yeah. And the interesting thing is you can watch a different guy. You watch the episode multiple times and focus in on a different ball in the background, and they've all got something in their minds. They're all thinking about something, and they're all you could almost see which ones are going, thinking about how they can deceive or how they can take advantage of the situation. And I don't know, Cliff, it just was a joy to work with him for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm sure each of them have their own agendas, but at the base agenda for all of them, it's like, okay, how can I get rid of all of these other a-holes?
Yeah, yeah,
How can I get this thing taken out of the back
exactly.
of my neck, or wherever it was? I remember Cliff relating a story to me. He's not here, so I'm taking this opportunity to add these to the oral history.
Yeah.
For this episode, he relayed a story to me about working with Peter West for this
Yep.
episode, and there's a tighter shot where there's two of them, and one comes around the corner. I think he's holding a gun, and he puts his arm up on him and holds it into place, leaning his arm on the shoulder of the other Baal. And
Okay.
this was a Cliff idea. And Cliff
Right.
said to Peter West, he said, "I want to do this. I want to touch myself." His words,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
historically accurate. And Peter West, I'm sure, was like, "What? You want to what?" But he's like, "Put my arm up on myself." And Peter was like, "I'm going to give you one take at this, and you better get it right.
Right.
You can't, and just put it there and don't move it.
Right.
Because you
Right.
can't. If we're going to do the other person, you have to stay as still as possible. You can't like have pair you two with the same
Yeah,
like
and it's
motion
gonna,
of
yeah.
impacting it, and it's in the final product and it works.
Oh, that's great.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah, that's great. There's a certain amount, yeah, there's probably a certain amount of like they could adjust it
Of
or
play.
stabilize it a little bit, but yeah, you're
Yeah.
right. If he misses, if he's too high, if he like, I mean, he would have had to got the initial position
Mm-hmm.
dead, dead right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right.
Can I chew on you for a minute, Alan?
Of course. I don't know what that means, but that sounds like a Cliff Simon malapropism, but
When Carter is captured, her base codes would have immediately been invalidated. At
yeah,
least I
that's probably,
think.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you could hang a lantern on that, as Jonathan Glasser and some of the others would have said, by saying, having one of the characters say, "Well, someone, why weren't her codes locked out? Well, someone, screwed up." My dad saw that, and he commented on my dad's former military, so he's thinking through all this stuff. I was
Hilarious.
like, "Oh, okay." But at the end of the day, he's also the man who said, "You got to buy it." So,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
the
That one didn't. No, you're right. That's probably that makes perfect sense.
But the stuff that you guys managed to pull off, visual effects wise, cost wise, character wise, every single one of these episodes, you couldn't have pulled that off, 5, 6, 7 years earlier. And it was because everyone came together and was able to do the work that was needed to pull it off. That you guys were able to say, yeah, we're going to go there. We're going to have 30 balls and we're going to have them all in one shot when they're beamed away.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
Cliff Simon's just going to have to bear with it. He's going to be standing a while. 14, 15, 16. So
Now
good
your
stuff.
iPhone can basically do that, but yeah,
Right.
yeah. Back then, no, no.
I've been.
I did love. The one other thing. Sorry, this is sort of
No,
backtracking,
please.
but about those three episodes because I sort of think of them as a threesome. But the first two, I guess. Does the Lucian Alliance feature in Stronghold or no? Maybe just in Off the Grid.
Right. Yeah, they're not in that
Yes.
one.
It was. It struck. What I loved about that season 9 and 10 is
Hmm.
that what was so fun about writing for that is that there was the Ori storyline, particularly when
Hmm.
I write. I'm brand new. The Ori storyline's pretty much mapped out, right? I mean, they've got the Ori, they've created them, they've got an arc for what the Ori are going to do and where they're going to end up in season 20 or episode 20. I'm sorry. And so, what's left in terms of pitching is like, well, what else is out there? And I think Joe and Paul had created the Lucian Alliance in an earlier episode,
Hmm.
and what I really love doing is, I mean, I think that's why I ended up with so many Ball episodes because you're left looking at, well, what else is there? Who else is still out there? What can we, when there's a power vacuum, as there was when the Goa'uld are defeated, and there's a power vacuum, and then there's the Ori, and we're left, fighting the Ori, but there's all of these other people
Yep.
out there.
Nature hates a vacuum, and
Yeah, and what
these
is going to
worlds.
happen?
Yep.
Yeah, and that's kind of what fascinated me, and the political machinations on the Jaffa High Council, which I would, I think, and I would now admit, in hindsight, might not have been the most exciting TV in the world to watch a High Council meeting at the Jaffa had on Dakara, but
Well,
yeah,
what else
like
are you gonna do?
why? Yeah.
This society is being born free for the first time
Mhm.
in thousands of years. So
Right.
it's a story that had to be told because the audience would not have been accepting of it just being, yeah, this thing is happening. Teal'c says it's going
Happened
on.
off
No, we would
screen.
have wanted
Yeah.
to see something.
Yeah. Well, and by the way, I think that was the only time I got to work with Tony Amendola, who is just unbelievable. Memorable from before I even knew who he was. Like, when I was just watching the episodes to get familiarized with the show, you're just like, who's that guy? Like that guy character's amazing. I like that guy. His
Magnetic.
voice. And yeah, so I mean, just the chance to work with Tony Amendola, I think, or have that on my resume was great.
Absolutely. Were there any legacy characters who had died or weren't available or from either any of the shows that you were like, you know what? I really wish I could have written for them. But they're dead or the
Yeah,
character's dead. And was there ever a time where it was like, you know what? I just wish I would have, had a really good shot at Jack.
yeah,
I
yeah,
could have put some words in Rick's mouth and he could have, made a meal out of them by modifying something here or there and doing his Jackisms. Was there
yeah. Well,
anyone?
definitely. I mean, Jack O'Neill comes to mind because obviously when I joined, he was no longer with the show. He did come back for the 200th episode,
Yep.
and I'm trying to remember if I actually like because we split that episode up, and so I was right. I only wrote 4 or 5 scenes for that episode, and I don't quite remember um, if he was in any of them. I'm trying to remember if I actually was able to write for. But Jack O'Neill obviously comes to mind as somebody that had been wrapped by the time I came on board.
Sure.
I'm trying to think if there's anybody else that fits that bill.
While you're chewing on that, do you recall the scenes from 200 that you did write
I
that
know
that
that
didn't include Jack?
yeah, I know that I wrote the Teal'c as Shaft parody.
With
Um,
Isaac Hayes voiceover.
yeah, I'm trying to remember what led up to that though. I wrote some additional scenes leading up to that, and then the parody was kind of capping that off. But I don't remember what they were. I
Okay.
can't. I'd have to. I'd have to do some research.
No, that's fair. I would love to see a copy of the script for 200 if anyone Alan, is willing to let me have a look at it, because it's just such an iconic episode, and it was one of those. It was, I remember Brad saying people are going to love it or they are going to hate it, and I remember
Yeah.
watching it saying, what's not to love about this? This is so cool. Every 10 seconds there's an inside joke, and we're
Yeah.
we're doing Leonardo DiCaprio pointing at the TV.
Oh yeah.
But
The what was the oh yes, the I remember the previously on with the furlings. That was like the big takeout.
well, that never happened. I had an interesting conversation with Rob earlier this year, and he said, as far as he is concerned, the table read is canon,
Oh,
but the
okay.
vignettes are not.
Right, right,
Whereas
right.
I was going to say the whole thing isn't, because at the end I don't have the right outfit, and Walter comes around the corner and immediately transforms. I thought that was the giveaway of saying, okay, this whole thing is fabricated. But as far as Rob is concerned, the table reads are canon. So
Interesting.
yeah, this is not what I expected.
Huh.
Let's go into the road not taken.
Ah,
Now,
yes.
this episode is pretty intense,
Hmm.
and I'm wanting to know, and I said something similar to Joe, but I want to couch it in this, because I came away with this idea that from the show being presented, The Road Not Taken, that were the Stargate program to be revealed to the Earth in real life, if there was something going on, it would really come down more like what we see here, where there was basically bedlam,
Yeah.
and it would take a while for everyone to pick up the pieces, but there would be a number of casualties.
Yeah.
Or did you see this as, let's tell one where it just hit the fan, and no, that wouldn't be like it for us. And I asked Joe Malazzi a similar question, like, were you telegraphing to us that were this really to take place, that this might be how it would go down? And he took umbrage with my use of the word telegraphing, but I'm curious as to your take on this before we get into the events of the episode.
I definitely think that was, well, first of all, I think that's probably what would happen if you told the public about it.
In an
I don't
emergency
believe that,
situation.
yeah, I don't believe that what they did in that alternate reality or alternate universe is what would happen. I think the high level people would know, but I think it would be sort of universally agreed worldwide that we cannot let the public in on this. But if it slipped out, and there was no way to prevent it from getting
Yeah,
out.
here they
I
come.
mean, yeah, like if someone had somehow got a hold of the footage of the dogfight over Antarctica, or
Right.
whatever else was the trigger point. I'm not sure what
Yeah.
the trigger point was in that reality, but yeah, I think societal collapse is probably what would happen
Hmm.
if the existence of this technology was
Hmm.
revealed to the world and it had been kept secret for hundreds of years, not for dozens of years or however long it had been kept secret. I think, yeah, I do think the mayhem and societal collapse is not. I think we might have undersold it, to be perfectly
In
honest.
some cases, yeah, at least temporarily, at least for a few weeks or months,
Yeah,
and then people
yeah,
would have gotten to shake it off and be like, okay, now we know what we do. I think in this circumstance, the Ori were coming, and
that's
satellites were
right.
picking them up, and instead of going, oh my God, we have no plan, they were like, okay, we actually have this program. There is a plan. The cat is out of the friggin' bag. I
Yeah,
love this episode on a number of layers, but particularly for Bo Bridges' performance
yeah,
as President Landry. You get to take this father, grandfather figure that has endeared us to him, with the basketball hoop in his office, and he's grumpy and he's grouchy, but really, he's a teddy bear on the inside in many ways, like Don was, and turn him into someone who has been forced into a situation and has now found peace being that way. That's
yeah.
scary stuff.
Yeah, yeah. No, and the funny thing, a little bit of trivia about this episode, it wasn't originally written for Hank Landry. We wrote it to be I can't remember the actor's name, but the president has appeared in Stargate
William
before.
Devane.
William Devane, yeah. The script was written for William Devane, and
He was probably
when
busy shooting a Colonial Penn commercial.
well, yeah, something went wrong. And we knew it was supposed to happen, and there was just some miscommunication between producers and casting or whoever was supposed to reach out to find out his availability, and it turns out he was not available to shoot the episode. And this is like my kind of second year on the job, and they come in, they're like, "Oh, William Devane's not available," and my face just like all the blood.
Oh
And
no.
what the what the hell are we gonna do? And
Yeah.
then I think Rob was the one who came up with the idea. It was like to make it Landry, and
Works for
it's
me.
oh my God, it was an incredible save. It was such a rich moment. The reveal. I sort of was looking. I was watching it the other day, and I think there's two reveals that happen. I think before that would have been better if we'd seen them a little bit later. One is Hammond, right? We cut before we reveal that Hammond is in charge. We cut to Hammond is in the control room, and then he goes to see Carter. And I just, in retrospect, wish we had sort of delayed his reveal until we see it through Carter's eyes. And then I think we did the Landry one a little better, maybe,
Hmm.
where we don't actually reveal that he's the president
I
until
love. Oh, go ahead.
yeah, until that scene, until the actual say, "Oh, I'm the president" or something. I think
Exactly.
we did it a little bit better. Oh, it hasn't been in my office for 3 years or however long, and then we walk in and it's Hank Landry.
Yeah, and his office is aboard Prometheus, which wasn't destroyed in this time. The other thing that I really loved was having Cavan as a member of SG-1.
Yes, yes,
That was a great nod, and that he and Sam had grown closer. Proximity is so much of the human equation. You know, if something happened to Mitchell or O'Neill, and Lorne was brought into that situation, this is something that I don't think they were romantic really, but they were definitely close friends, just like Sam and Daniel were, and Sam and Teal'c were. And I love that
uh,
little nod when you also brought in McKay too. So because the Atlantis expedition hadn't expedited, so and they were all there. So it was just
yeah.
let's pick this one, plug them in.
And I love, and I think that we may not have had we may not have had Michael Shanks for this episode at all, which is why
Yeah, Sam
I
was
think
being
that's
born.
why. That's right, yeah.
Hmm.
So we weren't going to show him in the alternate reality, but yeah, the beauty of being able to. One of my earliest pitches to Rob was, can we put Mitchell in a wheelchair? Can I actually, if we in the alternate reality, and I wanted him with the big long hair and the, whatever, and he wanted to smoke. And that was kind of we're not sure if we're going to let that go, but then they let it go. So he lights up a cigarette in that state because they figured, okay, well he's in an alternate reality. He's not the Mitchell we know. We don't want our hero smoking, but we're prepared to let
That's right.
this Mitchell, yeah, smoke.
Lieutenant Dan all the way.
Yeah, yeah. So, but yeah, and we got to be able to put him in a wheelchair and have him smoke and things like that. I see him as a completely different character. I think was a rare treat. And then McKay, I mean, bringing in McKay obviously was.
Oh my God,
Um,
you're a lesbian. McKay! The things that he says in some of these episodes that you could not get away with publishing now.
no, I know. Some of those
God.
lines didn't necessarily age that well, but a big shout out to I think it was Paul did a big rewrite on this
Okay.
episode because when we were breaking it, we kind of were going for. I don't think we really figured out what the theme of the episode was. Like, what was the episode supposed to say? At the time, I
Yeah.
think it was like because when I wrote it, I did my drafts. I did two drafts, and we were still sort of hung up on the celebrity aspect of Carter becoming a celebrity and being uncomfortable with it. And what is the price of celebrity? What does that do to a person? In fact, the working title of the episode was Celebrity for a little while.
Oh, wow.
And then she appeared. I wrote a scene where she appeared on a late night talk show, and like but something wasn't quite working. And then Paul took it away for a weekend and really focused it in on the dangers, like it took what was happening in that alternate reality and made it much much worse. I had written scenes. I think that scene about like them bombing the Irish village with
With the
F-302.
F-302s.
That was in my draft, but there were just little nuggets here and there, and I think Paul was able to just it's all about levers, right? He beefed up the the things he took pushed some levers up and some down, and made that story resonate so much more. And the other thing I like about that episode is just from a fan standpoint, is the defeat of the Ori
Hey
is the
kids.
act of, it's act two. Like, it's just like,
Right.
in any other episode, that would have been the entire episode. That would be act five and rushing to get the grid,
Yeah.
transfer the power from the grid to
But that's not where the story is for this one.
that's right.
And that's an
That's right.
interesting like turning expectations on their ear. Yeah.
So I mean, I like that episode. There were a lot of little, and it was fun to just, I just began to imagine, like, yeah, of course the Prometheus would be Air Force One. Why would you use a stupid jet when you had a ship in orbit? And so, like, little things like that just were, you were able to play around with what it would be like. But I really, hats off. I think it was Paul. And apologies if it wasn't, but I think Paul did the final sort of, rewrite of that, and just encapsulated, just really tightened it up and made it the episode that it was.
And Amanda was solid.
Oh, absolutely.
Carter, I'm many Carter lines stick in my head, but two of them are from this episode that I've just never forgotten. And one of them is, "I will not help you subvert democracy."
Right.
I always think about that, especially when I see people subverting democracy, but then when it goes the other way, they complain about it. And the other one is in response to Hammond's "The threat is still out there." She says, "That's the problem. It always will be." Can you take credit for either of those?
I don't even remember.
Okay.
I could check, but I don't.
Okay.
I don't remember.
Yeah, no, it's fair. And Kendall
Better not
Cross.
to.
No, well, yeah, it's fair. Better to play it safe. And Kendall Cross playing a neutered, like gun-shy Julia Donovan. Where before
right.
she was like, "Go, let's get the story. Let's get the story." And from this world, she was like, "You're asking me to do what on air? I'm not going to do that."
Right.
She and Carter have literally switched positions from a similar scene that they had with Thor just 2 years before, in terms of the desire to get information out. Like, whose boot is on whose face at this point?
Right.
And so there's a lot of great stuff in this episode, and a lot of meta stuff going on in terms of of making pieces move around, and in terms of the franchise. There was a chance to bring back a lot of different folks, and I really admire this episode for its guts to say, yeah, we're going to go there. This is season 10. We're in, to quote Christopher Judge, we're in bonus territory now. Let's just do it. It's a good one.
I got the rare privilege of having Beau Bridges come to my office to discuss his scenes. He wanted to tweak a couple of the lines in the conversation that he has with Hammond, I think, where where they're just discussing what to do with Carter and all that, and he had some ideas for, I don't remember exactly which scene it was or exactly which ideas, but I did recognize one of the lines that he had added when I watched it through the second time. I couldn't even quote it though. It's like, but yeah, it was a rare privilege to be like, I'm again fairly new to the industry, standing opposite Beau Bridges and having him discuss with me, can we make these changes? Asking my permission to make these changes. It's just like, my God.
Beau Bridges, Lou Gossett, they were at points in the show or in their careers where they had, I know in one instance they had family who loved the show, and they were ready to do something. They were at the point in their life where it's like, I'm going to do something for my family, and maybe I'll bend my rate here.
Right.
It's the stuff that you got away with in this franchise with some of these performers. Man, oh man, it's just unreal.
Bananas. I know. Yeah,
that's right.
Absolutely bananas.
We've been going for an hour, Alan. How much more can you realistically give me?
I about 15 minutes, I think.
Okay, I'll take 10 from you. Let's go to, and I'll have you back later this season. Let's go to fan code. I'm sorry I opened up with a rate dart and we didn't even get to Atlantis, so that's just life for me. But next week we'll do it. Next time we'll do Atlantis, and I'll do an SG1 opening. Fan questions. So Lockwatcher, you wrote for SG1 Atlantis Universe. Was there a distinct difference in any respect in writing for the three shows, from sets, production talent, or even money? Or was it just, I'm going to work and I'm writing, and this is the block of characters that I'm using?
It's funny, I didn't notice the difference between SG-1 and Atlantis while I was there. I think now that I go back and watch those episodes again, it did feel it does feel a little different. I mean, SG-1, by the time I got there, SG-1, the SG-1 canon was so full. It felt like you had to be a little more judicious in what your stories were about. You had to, you couldn't just, it couldn't be any old story. You had to really, you had to make sure it hadn't been done before. You had to make sure it wasn't going against the canon in some way. And so I think breaking the episodes for SG-1 always felt a little more, I don't want to say difficult, but it did feel like the stories were maybe more meaty or more, I don't know what's the word. I'm kind of blanking on the word. Whereas Atlantis was more a little bit more Wild West.
Yeah.
You could find brand new things, and you could take an SG-1 story that maybe it'd be, or a story, you pitch a story that had been done on SG-1, but it's different enough because it's a new galaxy, new group of people, and I'm not saying we copied each other, but I am saying you would inadvertently pitch a story and somebody'd say, "Oh, that sounds a lot like this." And then you'd say, "Oh, okay, but well, what if it were this instead?" And
Yeah.
and
Let's
then
pivot.
you'd pivot and you'd end up with a brand new story because it felt more brand new, it felt more like Wild West for lack of a better word. And the dynamic on Atlantis between Shepard and McKay, I don't know if we had a character that was a McKay on the SG-1 team. We had
McKay, but in terms of the teammates, no.
in the team,
Yeah.
right? Exactly. So I think, like writing for you always had to take into account when you're writing an Atlanta scene what, Taylor and McKay, but particularly McKay, because that was a character that I don't think there is no real match for McKay on the SG-1 team. Teal'c and Taylor, okay, they're both aliens with different points of view, and they speak more somberly, and Shepard and Mitchell, and I don't know, Daniel. I guess Daniel was sort of the closest analog to McKay, but they're so different, so very different.
Yeah,
So
one is holds a mirror up to remind us what the ethical perspective is, and the other one, heavily moves the plot forward.
yeah,
Not that Daniel
absolutely.
didn't, but that's kind of his function. And I'm waiting for ChatGPT and some of these. They may be there now to be advanced enough to ingest the entire body of transcripts for Stargate Atlantis, which is it's several. It's not gigs, but several megabytes inside. It's pretty big.
Yeah,
And my intent is, and I haven't done this yet, to feed it the transcripts of Atlantis, and I'm going to ask it, okay, give me the percentage of the dialogue that is McKay, and I will
I'm
bet
sure.
I will bet it's north of 40%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And then, sorry, the third part of the question was justice. And I have to say, I didn't. My time on justice was I assisted in the room on the development of the series, but then once my contract was over on SG-1 sorry, on Atlantis at that time, I was not hired on, or as I put it this way, we parted ways. They offered me a consulting position, and I didn't take it.
You were with Sanctuary, right?
I moved over to
Yeah, with
Sanctuary.
Damien.
Yeah, with Damien, which was a whole other, yeah, that which was a
Yeah.
lot of fun. But yeah, so Justice. I mean, what I didn't know, I wrote the episode Justice, but when I wrote it, it was originally slated as to be the ninth episode of the season. And during my absence, I think they realized, as is often the case with a serialized show, you realize you're like, oh, we can't do that until we've done this, and then we can't do that until we've done this, and it got
Ah.
pushed down the road, and it became the season finale. And all I can tell you about, so I wouldn't say that I mean, Justice is a completely different show, like tonally. And I think
Wow.
had I stayed with the show, I would have, I would have had more to say about how it was written and why that was different. In the in the days that I wrote my drafts of Justice, it was I was writing it like an SG-1 episode. Like
Yeah.
it felt, and I think that by the time they got further down the road and were shooting it, and it was shot with handheld and dark, and they saw what they had and designed a whole new look and feel for it. That as a result, I think the script that I wrote doesn't bear a great deal of resemblance to
Hmm.
what actually appeared on the show, and because it had changed so much. The elements that were in my show were the death, obviously, the trial,
Hmm.
the um, leaving Rush on the planet was
That
part
you
of.
created that.
Well, I mean, that was
That
part
was in
of the
yours.
assignment. Yeah, I don't
Okay.
know if I can't say I created that, but that was the pitch on the table, and that those elements did appear in my draft. But the idea of the ancient chair that wasn't a thing. I think in mine, Rush was working on trying to restore an oxygen tank or a conduit between an oxygen tank that was outside the safe zone. And so, I mean, and it's, the scientist was badly burned in mine. They sent scientists over to try to repair the conduit, and Young was concerned about radioactivity, and as it turns out, Young was right, and the scientist was badly burned. But honestly, that in my draft, we were more focused on the
Right.
trial and that took up a much greater part of the storyline. Um, and they actually did come to a verdict. They didn't suspend the trial as they did they came to a verdict. They found Young guilty. And they discussed
Oh.
punishment. And like it was a two thirds of the crew had voted for him to be convicted of murder, and so he was sent to the brig. And I mean, and all these things were you know back when I was writing it were perfectly logical, but when they viewed it in the context of the other things they were trying to achieve with the episode, it just a lot of that just got
Hmm.
lost. Just we actually the other thing, which I think was a good change, in my draft, we the audience actually saw the footage of Rush uh, taking the gun and disabling the Kino.
Aquino captured it.
The Kino captured it,
Okay.
and we saw it, and then that was I'm not sure if they even I don't know if it was shot or not, but it didn't appear in the episode
Hmm.
that you kindly sent to me. Thank you. I'd actually never seen it.
It's okay.
Uh, and then later on the planet, I think I think Young mentions it, brings it up, and says you deleted the episode. You found him. You took the gun. I saw the rest of that footage, but
Ooh.
Young had seen it and we hadn't, and we didn't find out till later on the planet.
Was the intent
I
that he
think the
had gone through
basic
the whole trial knowing the truth?
No, I no he
He found
he
out
had
later.
found out after the fact,
Okay.
but it's weird how knowing I read the script and then I watched the episode, and it's weird how knowing that fact in advance kind of made the last act less shocking, because you're like, well, yeah, he is a danger, or you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it really maligned Rush
Hmm.
to a point where you were less sympathetic to him being left on the planet.
The guy's a
And
snake.
yeah, exactly. And it was less of a you know I don't know. It was less dramatic of an act by
Yeah.
Young. So anyway, I think that was that change. I don't know what point it was made, but I think it was a good change.
Yeah, I go back and I watch that scene at the end there, and he wakes up in a beautiful night sky, and it's like, part of me, is like, what does he do now? And the other part of me is like, I can't say I'm all that sorry for him, you know.
Yeah,
But he began that he that's really one of his lowest points, and then getting probed by the fish people. So, wow, what a show, though.
yeah.
Raj, Marsha, Kathy's call. We basically answered all your questions there. Thank you, guys. Gabby Federer, the last question here. The road not taken. Was it your intention from the start that the opposite universe's Carter dies, or had you ever thought to make the other Carter appear in our universe, and just not cover her, and she comes back to our side, and they're like, oh yeah, this other Carter we've been hanging out with this whole time. And let me tell you, she can sing.
Yeah, that would have been great. I honestly don't remember. I know that. Yeah, I honestly don't remember if that was considered at all. I know that it sort of defeated what we know of the what we know of the fictional technology
That's
that
right.
allowed the bridge is one way, uh, or which is what we eventually landed on.
Hmm.
It may have been discussed in the room. I actually
Hmm.
truly don't know. It that apart from that, I mean, I do love that episode, but I will say that the circumstance that that allowed Carter to be pulled through was hotly debated. Like it's so coincidental. Like it's so coincidental that at the exact moment, and I guess, look, if you're a subscriber of the multiverse theory that says that yes, there must be a universe out there where at the exact moment I was testing the out of phase device, she was pulling, energy from our universe. But it's just so coincidental. That's a hard one to fathom.
There,
However, as you say, you put it, you get past it,
you have
and then
to.
the rest of the episode is about it.
Tom J. Astle wrote a season 1 episode of SG1 called Korai, which is my favorite Teal'c episode. And it has a really big moment near the end where the Gould suddenly show up in the nick of time to give the people an excuse to break Teal'c out of jail. And I asked Tom, I said, did that feel like a contrivance to you? And he said, yes, it was a contrivance because I contrived it. I'm like,
fair, yeah.
Okay, moving on.
Somebody gave me some advice. I don't know if it was in the Stargate room or later, but I was saying, like, yeah, but it was like, I don't really know. How am I just going to get her to say that? And then it was like, well, because you decide what she says. And I'm like, oh, I guess you're right. Yeah, like.
Well, what's happening is a part of you in your head has Carter, in this case, shouting at you, saying, I wouldn't say that.
Yeah.
And so in some cases, when I'm writing, the characters don't say it aloud to me, but I feel them saying it to me.
Yeah,
and it's like, it's like they're pushing back. It's like, okay, then I have to come up with a reason to convince myself to get that version of the character to make it meaningful and reasonable to say something.
That's right.
The games we play with ourselves.
Real. Which is the goal. We're trying to make everything feel as real as we can, and as grounded, as authentic as we can.
Alan, this has been tremendous. Thank you so much for spending so much time with us. We're gonna wrap somewhere around September or October. I'll reach out to you in a few months and see what your situation is, and make sure that they're still putting down food and water for you, and we'll talk a little bit more.
Lovely. Thank you so much.
Thank you for everything, sir. I'm gonna wrap up over here.
Okay, you bet.
Thank you.
All right, cheers.
Alan McCullough, everyone, producer and writer for Stargate SG1, Atlantis, and Universe. I meant to have him back far sooner, so I do apologize to him for not getting this going back with him in a more timely manner, but I'm glad we've got him now. So I have got a couple 3 shows heading for you tomorrow. We've got tomorrow John Billingsley and Patrick McKenna, the other guys. They're going to be joining us at, I believe, 1 p.m. Pacific time. And that's Gate World. That's not Dial the Gate. Let me have a look here real quick. Come on. 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. Jillian Barber, who played Dreylock and a resident, is joining us at 1 p.m. tomorrow. And then Shane Meyer, who played Garen and Nelius, he's joining us on Monday, May the 5th at 3 p.m. Pacific. My tremendous thanks to my moderating team. I could not pull this off without you guys. Anthony, Jeremy, Kevin, Lockwatcher, Marcia, Raj, you guys make the show possible. I really appreciate you. My producers, Anthony, Kevin, and Linda. And big thanks to Frederick Marcoux over at Concepts Web, who keeps dialthegates.com up and running. We're cooking with gas with season 5 here, and we've got. I'm going to be slowing down a little bit. I wanted the first few episodes per week to be about 4 in number. I'm going to begin to dial them down to around 3. I say begin because that's what my aim is. And if more of the people that I've been reaching out to contact me and say we're good, then that's going to go up to 4. But if not, it's going to go down to 3 because I don't want to give my moderators absolute burnout. Love you guys. Appreciate y'all. My name is David Reed for Dial the Gate, and I will see you on the other side.